Trust isn't something you lose all at once. It bleeds out slowly, like air from a punctured tire, until one day you're stranded on the side of the road, wondering how the hell you got there. Some betrayals come with warning signs. Others sneak up on you wearing the face of someone you love, carrying your own identity in their back pocket like a stolen wallet. If our stories resonate with you, don't forget to like, comment, and tell us where you're watching from. This story was shared with us by one of our longtime viewers who wanted his painful lesson heard by others considering marriage abroad. I'm sitting in my empty Bangkok condo right now, staring at divorce papers written in Thai that I can barely understand. The legal symbols blur together like insects crawling across white paper. 6 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. Married to Wari, a sweet 34-year-old woman who made me feel young again at 71. I'd moved here from Montreal after my pension kicked in, bought this place in Thonglor and convinced myself I'd found paradise. The marriage felt real in ways my first marriage back home never had. She cooked traditional Aisan dishes that made my mouth water. We went to temples together every Sunday morning. She even learned basic French to surprise me on my birthday. Je t'aime, Edmund, she'd whisper in my ear, her accent thick but sincere. But there were always these little moments that didn't add up. Phone calls she'd take in another room, speaking rapid Thai in hushed tones. Her cousin Apina visiting too often, always whispering secrets I couldn't understand. I told myself it was just cultural differences, that I was being paranoid like my ex-wife Dorothy always said I was. You're always looking for problems, Edmund. Dorothy used to say during our fights in Montreal. Can't you just be happy? So I tried to be happy. I pushed down the little voice that wondered why Wari's phone was always face down on the table, why she changed the subject whenever I asked, about her family's finances, why she seemed nervous whenever immigration officers called about our marriage visa renewal. I was 71 years old, for Christ's sake. What did I know about young Thai women and their complicated family dynamics? I'd married Dorothy when she was 23 and I was 25, both of us naive kids from Quebec who thought love was enough to build a life on. This felt different, mature, like we were both bringing something real to the table. She brought youth and energy and those beautiful smiles that made me forget my arthritic knees. I brought stability and security and stories about Canada that made her eyes light up with dreams of snow and maple syrup. It started with a notification on my phone that made no sense. You have a new match on Tinder. The little pink heart icon, glowing on my lock screen like a cruel joke. I hadn't used dating apps in over 3 years, not since I met Wari at that coffee shop on Sukhumvit Road. She'd been reading an English novel, Pride and Prejudice, struggling with the difficult vocabulary. I offered to help, bought her coffee, and 3 months later we were married in a small ceremony at Bangkok City Hall. I tried logging into my old Tinder account, expecting to find it deactivated, but it was already active with fresh photos of me that I'd never uploaded. Professional shots from our wedding that Wari had taken on her phone. Casual pictures from our honeymoon in Phuket, where I'm wearing that ridiculous floral shirt she bought me. Someone had been using my profile for weeks, maybe months. My heart was racing as I scrolled through conversations with dozens of women, all conducted in broken English that wasn't mine. Hello, beautiful lady, you look very nice. I am Canadian man with good pension. Messages about meeting for short time and long time, terms I'd learned, meant something very different in Thailand than back home. The profile claimed I was single, wealthy, and looking for genuine connection. 3 qualities that described me perfectly before I met Wari. But I wasn't single anymore. I was married, supposedly happy, living what I thought was an honest life with a woman I loved. The conversations were detailed, personal. This fake Edmund knew about my diabetes medication, my monthly pension amount, even the scar on my left shoulder from a hockey accident in my 20s. Information only Wari should have known. Information I'd shared during our most intimate conversations, lying in bed on Sunday mornings telling her stories about my life back home. Who is this? I whispered to my empty condo, but part of me already knew. The writing style was familiar, the way this fake Edmund mixed English with little Thai phrases. I take care you good, Naha. That was exactly how Wari spoke when she was trying to be charming. I screenshot everything before confronting Worry. The evidence folder on my phone grew to over 40 images, conversations, profile photos, even payment confirmations from women who'd sent money for introduction fees. When I showed her the Tinder profile, she went completely silent for maybe 30 seconds, her face drained of color like someone had unplugged her from the wall. Then the tears started, big, dramatic. Sobs that would have convinced me 6 months ago. "Edmund, why you show me this? This not me." She claimed she'd never seen it before, suggested maybe someone hacked my phone, but I'd changed all my passwords months ago after a banking scare when someone tried to access my Montreal account. She kept saying, I don't know, in that way people do when they absolutely do know. I asked her to call Apina, her cousin who'd been around so much lately, the woman who always seemed to disappear into the kitchen whenever I walked into a room, who spoke perfect English but pretended not to understand me whenever I asked direct questions. Worry's face went white when I mentioned her name. She started speaking rapid Thai, pacing around our living room like a caged animal. "Apina mai chai con chai," she kept repeating. Apina is not a helper. That's when I knew for certain. This wasn't some random scammer in Nigeria using stolen photos. This was someone with access to my personal photos, someone who knew my daily routine, someone who could take new pictures of me without me noticing, someone who lived close enough to observe my life, study my habits, catalogue my vulnerabilities. "Call her now," I demanded, holding up my phone with the fake dating profile still glowing on the screen. "Call her right fucking now, Worry." Apina arrived within an hour, which should have been my first clue that she lived closer than the other side of Bangkok, she'd always claimed. She walked in like she owned the place, immediately started arguing with Worry in Thai. Their voices rose and fell like music, but angry music, desperate music. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. Accusations, denials, desperate, bargaining. Finally, I slammed my hand on the coffee table hard enough to make our wedding photo jump. "English. Both of you speak English right now." Apina looked at me with this mix of defiance and fear I'd never seen before. She was younger than Worry, maybe 28, with the kind of sharp intelligence that made me uncomfortable. "Okay, Uncle Edmund. You want to know truth?" She admitted to creating the profile, but swore it was just for fun and that she never met anyone. Just for fun, like identity theft was a hobby. She'd been taking photos of me secretly for months, while I napped on the balcony during our dinners out at local restaurants, even some through our bedroom window from the building next door. The violation felt deeper than theft. She'd been studying me, cataloguing my life, turning me into a commodity for lonely women across Bangkok. "You handsome man for Farang," she said, with that same calculating smile she'd given me at our wedding. "Thai ladies like older Western man, you perfect for business." Business. That's what I was to her. Not Worry's husband, not a human being with feelings, just a product to be packaged and sold. "How many women?" I asked, dreading the answer. She showed me her phone reluctantly, scrolling through conversation after conversation. Maybe 40, 50. They pay good money to meet you. The most disturbing part was how casual she seemed about it, like we were discussing the weather instead of systematic fraud. What I discovered next broke something inside me that I'm still trying to fix. This wasn't just Apina playing around with dating apps. It was a systematic operation with spreadsheets, payment schedules, and customer service protocols. She showed me her phone reluctantly, revealing conversations with over 40 women organized by payment status. Green dots for women who'd already paid introduction fees, yellow for those still considering, red for women who'd gotten suspicious and stopped responding. She'd been charging them between 2,000 and 5,000 baht for dates with me, promising them a wealthy foreign husband who spoke French and owned property in Montreal. Some had paid up front for introduction fees, with promises of romantic dinners and trips to Pattaya. Others were being strung along with promises of marriage and Canadian citizenship. "This lady pay 3,000 baht to meet you next week," she said, showing me a photo of a hopeful-looking teacher named Sirinapa. She buy new dress, make hair beautiful. My identity had become a product being sold across multiple dating platforms. Tinder, Thai-friendly, Bangkok matching, my face was everywhere. Attached to lies I'd never told, promises I'd never made. The most disturbing part was how well she'd studied me. The fake profile knew details about my pension amount, my diabetes medication schedule, even my late wife's name. "Your first wife, Dorothy, died from cancer. Very sad," the fake Edmund had written to one woman. "Now I ready for new love in Thailand." Information that only Worry should have known. Information I'd shared during our most intimate conversations. Pillow talk that had been recorded, analyzed, and weaponized. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, but I could already see the answer in Worry's guilty face. "Before we married?" Apinya looked at Worry, some silent communication passing between them. "Uncle Edmund, you lonely man when we meet you. Worry just want help you be happy. Help me be happy by stealing my identity and selling it to strangers. Help me be happy by turning my face into a lie that would disappoint dozens of innocent women. When I demanded the truth from Worry, the whole story came out like poison from a wound. She'd been feeding Apinya information about me from the very beginning, from our first coffee date at that Sukhumvit shop. Every personal detail I'd shared, every vulnerable moment, had been catalogued and weaponized. They'd planned this before we even got married. The whole relationship was a setup to gain access to my identity, my financial information, my emotional vulnerabilities. "I just tell her small things," Worry sobbed, "about your pension, your health. She say just curious about Western husband." But small things added up to a complete dossier. They knew I took my diabetes medication at 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. They knew I got lonely on Sundays and overspent on groceries when I was sad. They knew I missed Montreal winters and still wore my wedding ring from Dorothy on a chain around my neck. Worry kept crying and saying she'd fallen in love with me for real after the wedding, that it wasn't supposed to go this far. "Edmund, I love you true, but family need money and you have so much. How do you believe someone who's been systematically lying to you for over a year?" She claimed she'd tried to stop Apinya several times, but the money was too good. They'd made over 200,000 baht in just 3 months, nearly 6,000 Canadian dollars, just from women paying to meet me, more than most Thai families made in a year. Apinya say just little bit longer, then we stop. But women keep paying, keep wanting meet handsome Canadian man. She painted it like they were victims too, trapped by their own success. But I'd seen the spreadsheets, the systematic way they'd organized their fraud. This wasn't desperation, it was entrepreneurship. "Did you ever love me?" I asked, hating how pathetic I sounded. She nodded frantically. "Yes, real love. After we marry, I love you so much, but before—" She trailed off, unable to admit that our entire courtship had been a business transaction. "Before you just Mark, rich Farang who looked like good husband, for visa." At least she was finally being honest. The worst part was seeing the women Apinya had scammed using my identity. She showed me their photos reluctantly, a parade of hopeful faces that made my heart ache. Messages filled with genuine excitement about meeting their Canadian prince. One woman, Sirinapa, had bought new clothes for our date that never happened. A beautiful blue dress that probably cost her a week's salary. Another, Plaiwan, had borrowed money from her family to pay the introduction fee, telling them she'd finally found a good foreign husband. "This one very sweet," Apinya said casually, scrolling through Plaiwan's messages. "She send you poem about love every day. Very romantic lady." These weren't bar girls or professional scammers. They were teachers, nurses, office workers looking for real love. My face had become a symbol of hope that turned into heartbreak for dozens of innocent women. I felt responsible for their pain, even though I'd never spoken to any of them. They'd fallen in love with a version of me that didn't exist, a carefully crafted persona designed to extract money from lonely hearts. "How could you do this to them?" I asked Apinya. "They're innocent women looking for love." She shrugged like I was being dramatic. "They not innocent. They want rich Farang husband. For money too. Same. That casual dismissal of human emotions, that reduction of love to economic transaction, told me everything I needed to know about Apinya's worldview. She showed no remorse, only irritation at being caught. She kept insisting it wasn't real. Harm because the women would find someone else eventually. That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with someone who'd made a mistake. This was a predator who saw people as marks, including me. To her, I was just another lonely farang with more money than sense, ripe for exploitation. The women paying. To meet me were just customers buying a fantasy. Love, loneliness, hope, they were all just products to be packaged and sold. I wanted to go to the police immediately, but Wari begged me to handle it privately. She was terrified about her visa status, worried about bringing shame to her family back in Isayan. Please, Edmund, if police know, my family lose face. My grandmother very sick, need medicine money. Part of me still loved her, still wanted to. Believe she was a victim caught between family pressure and a manipulative cousin. But when I consulted a lawyer recommended by the Canadian Embassy, the situation became even more complicated. Identity theft laws in Thailand are murky when it involves family members with legitimate access to your photos and information. Technically, your wife had permission to use your photos for social media, the lawyer explained, in his air-conditioned office overlooking the Chao Phraya River. The fraud occurred when her cousin used them for commercial purposes without your knowledge. He suggested it might be treated as a civil matter rather than criminal, which meant months of legal battles with no guarantee of justice. Worse, some of the women who'd been scammed might have grounds to sue me directly, even though I'd never met them. They paid money based on promises made using your identity, he warned. In Thai law, you could be considered partially liable. My face, my identity, my reputation, they were all compromised beyond repair. The lawyer's fees alone would cost more than the scammers had made, and there was no guarantee I'd win. My advice? Cut your losses and move on. Thailand has many beautiful women who won't steal your identity. Easy for him to say. He wasn't 71 years old, starting over in a foreign country where he couldn't read the legal documents. What about the women who were scammed? I asked. He shrugged. Not your problem anymore. They chose to send money to strangers online. That cold dismissal of their pain bothered me more than losing my own money. These women had believed in love, had hope for a better future, and we'd turned that hope into a product. I couldn't just walk away from that responsibility, even if the law said I could. Living with Wari after the revelation was like sharing space with a stranger wearing a familiar face. Every smile felt calculated, every gesture seemed performed. I'd catch her on her phone and wonder if she was coordinating with Apina or planning something new. The intimacy we'd built over months evaporated overnight. She slept on the couch, claiming she was giving me space, but I think she was just afraid of me. Not physically. I'd never hurt anyone, and at 71 I couldn't hurt a fly if I wanted to. But afraid of my disappointment, my questions, my constant surveillance. I started checking my phone obsessively, paranoid that new profiles were popping up, that my identity was still being harvested somewhere else. I changed all my passwords again, deleted social media accounts, even considered changing my phone number. The woman I'd married was sitting 10 feet away from me, but I felt more alone than I had in decades. "Edmund, can we talk?" she'd ask softly. But what was there to talk about? How do you rebuild trust with someone who'd been cataloguing your vulnerabilities for over a year? "I love you," she'd whisper, and maybe that was even true now. But love, built on lies, isn't love at all. It's just another kind of fraud. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and find her crying quietly on the couch, but I couldn't comfort her anymore. My empathy had been used against me too many times. Every kindness felt like a weakness they could exploit. "Why you not forgive me?" she asked. One morning over coffee. "Dorothy forgive you when you make mistake in Canada, but I'd never stolen Dorothy's identity and sold it to strangers. I'd never turned her face into a product for my own profit." The mistakes Wari was comparing to were human failures, forgetting anniversaries, working too late, leaving dishes in the sink, not systematic betrayal designed to extract money from innocent women. The scale wasn't even comparable, but she couldn't see that. To her, forgiveness was forgiveness, as if all betrayals were equal. A week later, I found out the operation was even bigger than I'd imagined. Apina hadn't just used my identity. She'd been farming information from other foreign husbands in the neighborhood. My German neighbor Klaus knocked on my door one evening, holding printouts of dating profiles featuring his photo. Edmund, I think we have same problem. The Australian retiree Graham from the next building joined us an hour later with his own evidence. Their photos were floating around dating sites too, attached to similar promises of wealth and marriage. We formed an informal support group, 3 old men comparing notes on how we'd been systematized and exploited. Klaus had been through a similar situation 2 years earlier, but kept quiet out of embarrassment. I thought it was just my Niran being careless with photos, he admitted, but now I see it was business plan. Graham was still married to his Thai wife, but discovered she'd been sharing his financial information with relatives who were using it for loan applications. They had my bank statements, my pension details, even my health insurance information, he said. I found out when the bank called about suspicious activity. The pattern was clear. Find lonely foreign men, gain their trust through marriage or relationships, then exploit their identities for profit. We weren't husbands or partners. We were resources to be mined until depleted. How many more of us? Are there? Graham wondered aloud. We walked around the neighborhood that night, identifying other foreign retirees, wondering which ones were victims and which ones had just gotten lucky. The woman at 7-Eleven gave us knowing looks. The security guard at my building asked if we needed help with girl problems. Even strangers could see we were being played, but we'd been too lonely, too hopeful, too trusting to notice. Should we warn the others? Klaus asked. But how do you tell a man his wife might be stealing his identity without destroying his life? Most wouldn't believe us anyway. Love makes people blind to obvious red flags. 3 weeks later, immigration officers showed up at my door with questions about my marriage visa status. 2 serious-looking officials in crisp uniforms who spoke perfect English and seemed to know more about my situation than I expected. Apparently, Wari had reported our separation to protect herself from potential fraud charges, but this left my visa in limbo. Where is your wife now? They asked, examining our marriage certificate with suspicious eyes. I told them she'd returned to Iceland, but I couldn't provide an address because she'd never told me exactly where her family lived. They wanted documentation proving our relationship was genuine, photos, witnesses, financial records, evidence that I now knew was largely fabricated. My marriage visa required us to be cohabiting, but she was gone. My retirement visa had expired the year before when I switched to the marriage visa for better benefits. Suddenly, I was facing potential deportation from the country I'd called home for 2 years. The immigration officer, a kind woman named Trada, explained the situation with professional sympathy. Mr. Edmund, your marriage visa is no longer valid if wife is not living with you. You need new visa or must leave Thailand. She suggested I could apply for a new retirement visa, but I'd have to leave Thailand first and reapply from Montreal. The bureaucratic nightmare of untangling my life felt overwhelming at my age. I'd have to prove I had enough money in Canadian. Banks get health insurance, provide police clearances, all while living in limbo in a country that no longer felt like home. How long do I have? I asked, dreading the answer. 30 days, she said gently. We're sorry for your situation, but immigration law very strict. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been used for my legal status, and now that same status was being taken away. I'd helped Wari get permanent residency in Thailand through our marriage, but she'd left me vulnerable to deportation. Another layer of the scam I hadn't even considered. Packing up 2 years of my life into suitcases felt like dismantling a museum exhibit of someone else's dreams. I'd bought furniture expecting to die in that apartment, had photos printed and framed showing a happy couple that never really existed, the dining room table where Wari and I ate breakfast every morning, the bookshelf where I'd displayed photos of our wedding, our trips to Ayutthaya and Chiang Mai, the comfortable chair by the window where I'd read while she watched her soap operas. Everything had seemed so permanent, so real, so much like the life I'd imagined when I moved to Thailand. Now it all felt like props in an elaborate theatre production. My neighbors were sympathetic but distant. Nobody wanted to get too close to a scandal. Sorry about your trouble, the German Klaus said, but he was dealing with his own wife problems and couldn't offer much support. The Canadian embassy was helpful with the paperwork, but couldn't expedite the visa process. These things take time, the consular officer explained. Unfortunately, marriage fraud is becoming more common. Time I didn't have. I had 30 days to leave the country or face serious legal consequences. I sold most of my belongings at a fraction of their value to a British expat who was furnishing his own new place. Relationship gone sour? He asked tactfully while examining my dining room set. I nodded, not wanting to explain the details. Watching strangers carry away my dining room table, the bookshelf where I'd displayed photos of Worry and me, felt like attending my own funeral. Everything I'd built in Bangkok was revealed as temporary, conditional, borrowed. The life I'd thought was mine had actually belonged to someone else all along. I kept only 2 suitcases of clothes and personal items, everything that remained of my Bangkok adventure. My laptop with evidence of the fraud I'd probably never pursue, a few books I'd brought from Montreal, the necklace with Dorothy's wedding, ring that I'd never shown Worry. Somehow, keeping that secret felt like the only victory I could claim. I'm writing this from my nephew's basement apartment in Montreal, where I've been staying for the past month, while I figure out what comes next. The January cold cuts through my bones in ways I'd forgotten during my 2 years in tropical heat. Everything here feels smaller, grayer, more limited than I remembered. The Tinder profiles are finally gone. I hired a tech-savvy college student to help me scrub my identity from the internet. "Wow, Uncle, you were busy online," she joked when she saw the extent of the fake profiles. If only she knew. Some of the women who were scammed have contacted me through Facebook, and I've tried to apologize and explain what happened. A few were understanding, recognizing that I was a victim too, but others blamed me for being careless with my personal information. "How could you not know your wife was stealing from you?" one woman wrote angrily. "They're not wrong. I gave my whole life to someone I'd known for less than a year, trusted her with access to everything that mattered to me. The loneliness that drove me to Thailand in the first place is still here. Maybe stronger now because I know how it feels to have that void filled and then emptied again. I'm 71 years old, too proud to admit to my family how completely I was. Fooled, too embarrassed to apply for government assistance, too tired to start over somewhere new. But I'm alive, and I'm learning that sometimes survival is enough. My nephew tries to be supportive, but I can see the pity in his eyes. "Maybe you should try online dating here," he suggests helpfully. "Canadian women your age are more trustworthy." The irony makes me laugh. Online dating is exactly how this nightmare began. I've sworn off the internet entirely when it comes to romance. If I ever love again, it will be someone I meet in person, someone whose family I can visit, someone whose life I can verify beyond social media profiles and whispered promises. The dream of paradise was always an illusion, but the pain of losing, it taught me something valuable about the difference between being alone and being lonely. Sometimes the most expensive lesson is the one you needed most to learn. I still miss the warmth of Thailand, the kindness of strangers, the sense of adventure that comes with living in a foreign country. But I don't miss the constant uncertainty, the nagging feeling that something was wrong, the exhaustion of trying to love someone who was always performing for an audience I couldn't see. Maybe that's enough wisdom for one lifetime. Maybe learning to be alone without being lonely is the real paradise I've been searching for all along.